another meeting between Ukrainian and US negotiators regarding the peace plan. I'll tell you what is known about it later in the broadcast. I'm Solomia Vidvitska. This is TSN. Subscribe to our YouTube channel, watch the broadcast, and be sure to comment on what you found most interesting. Here are a few of today's topics. Sanctions forum in Kyiv.
Sanctions will continue to be used to put additional pressure on Russia and force it to come to the negotiating table.
How do Ukraine's partners plan to pressure Russia, and what does the 20th package of sanctions have to do with it? Take care of your eyesight.
A condition that is not just dangerous, it threatens blindness.
How dangerous can reading in the dark actually be to your eyes really when you read? Paintings in the windows.
That sound when a shahed actually lands. I shout that my parents need to run away.
Why did an artist from Dnipro decide to use her artworks as building materials? The Russians shot Ukrainian prisoners of war. Analysts from Deep State are reporting another war crime committed by the occupiers. This happened in the Donetsk region. The enemy captured 5 of our defenders in a grove during one of the attacks. The prisoners were forced to the ground and after interrogation were shot. The killing of prisoners is a direct violation of the Geneva Conventions and the Criminal Code of Ukraine. However, the Russians regularly carry out public executions, and as of July 2025, the Prosecutor General's office has investigated nearly 300 such crimes. The occupiers have intensified their assault on Siversk, attempting to break through our defensive line and encircle the city. Pokrovsk remains the hottest spot. There, the defense forces have achieved some successes. In the north of the city, they are taking control of the railway tracks and trying to straighten the front line. According to the defense forces, the Russians can no longer advance on neighboring Hryshyne and have begun to retreat from there. In neighboring Mirnohorod, our soldiers managed to destroy an enemy assault group that was trying to infiltrate the city's high-rise buildings. The most difficult situation there is in the south of Mirnohorod, and the defense forces refute the occupiers' claims that they are allegedly consolidating in the western part of the city. The enemy continues to press in the Zaporizhzhia direction, but the situation near Huliaipol has been stabilized. The Russians were stopped literally a step away from occupying the city thanks to the right decisions made by the command, according to the analytical resource Deep State. A 6-year-old boy and his mother were killed in Kherson. The Russians dropped explosives from a drone onto the car in which the family was traveling. The driver was injured. 5 more city residents came under fire from enemy drones. Among them was a 16-year-old girl. All of them were hospitalized with injuries, and 6 more locals were hurt as a result of Russian attacks on Chornobaivka and Novovorontsovka. In the Kharkiv region, there are 4 victims, a child and 3 adults. In Motuzivka, a private house was hit during the shelling. A woman and her 12-year-old son were injured. 1 person was killed and 4 were wounded in Donetsk region. In Druzhkivka, the Russians dropped 3 aerial bombs, killing 1 person, destroying 2 apartment buildings, private homes, and a school. Kramatorsk was hit with bombs and drones. There, 2 residents were wounded, and apartment buildings, a gas station, and an infrastructure facility were damaged. 3 people were wounded in the Dnipropetrovsk region. In the Sinelnikivsky district, an elderly man and a woman were injured. There are also casualties in the Nikopol district. The number of victims of the Russian terrorist attack in Ternopil has increased. According to the police, there are now 34 victims. 12-year-old Adriana died in the hospital, as reported by Mayor Serhiy Nadal. For 9 days, doctors fought to save the girl's life. However, her injuries turned out to be too severe. During the attack, Adriana's mother was also killed, and her sister is still in the hospital. The Russians struck Ternopil last week. They hit a local business and deliberately struck 2 nearby apartment buildings. Among the dead are 7 children. About 100 residents were injured. 6 more people are still considered missing. Foreign Minister Andriy Sybiga announced another meeting between Ukrainian and US negotiators regarding the peace plan. Earlier, the head of the president's office, Andriy Yermak, reported that this week, US Army Minister Dan Driscoll will come to Kyiv to finalize steps to end the war in Ukraine. Steve Witkoff, Trump's special envoy, will have the same task, but in Moscow. And if the preparation reaches its final stage, Trump will meet with Putin and Zelensky. Meanwhile, Politico reports that Europe is concerned that the US wants to conclude a peace agreement before providing security guarantees to Ukraine. Politico also writes that Trump has decided not to invite Zelensky to the White House until the agreement is signed. Some officials in Europe are concerned that the current US administration might tip the scales in favor of Russia. Meanwhile, the New York Times has learned that US Army Minister Dan Driscoll, while presenting his 28-point peace plan in Kyiv, allegedly warned Europeans about missile threats from Moscow directed at them and told Ukrainian officials that the threat of defeat and worsening negotiating positions loomed if the fighting continued. To make life even harder for the occupier, representatives from 21 countries gathered in Kyiv for the so-called Sanctions Summit. This is a meeting of coordinators where they will discuss concrete steps to make the restrictions on Russia more effective. Among the topics are the shadow fleet, energy, finance, the defense industry, and sanctions evasion. According to the government, Ukraine has prepared a number of its own proposals, and some of them may be included in the 20th package of sanctions, which Europe is currently finalizing. Therefore, this meeting will have significant practical benefits. In addition, Ukraine will also discuss sanctions against Rosatom and safeguards in the financial sector. After all, Russia often uses transactions through third-party countries or cryptocurrencies through which billions of dollars flow. Ukraine has also prepared a number of proposals regarding personal sanctions, which it will hand over to its partners and will once again raise the issue of using frozen Russian assets. EU representatives, for their part, promised that the strengthening of sanctions will be an ongoing process until the war is completely over, as they observe a deterioration in the Russian economy, especially in the social sphere, and they hope this will prompt the occupier to negotiate.
Everything we discussed today will concern not only how to stop Russia, but also how to prevent wars in general. If we want a lasting and just peace and to prevent a recurrence of aggression, we must support and develop the sanctions architecture for as long as possible.
All summit participants are firmly convinced, as long as the war continues, sanctions will continue to be used to exert additional pressure on Russia and force it to come to the negotiating table. This is exactly what Ukraine needs for its freedom and sovereignty.
In Russia, 8 people have been sentenced to life imprisonment for the bombing of the Crimean bridge, which was organized by the Security Service of Ukraine, SBU. The case was heard in Rostov-on-Don. On the defendant's bench are 2 entrepreneurs from the occupied Kherson region, the owners of a warehouse in the Armenian city of Armavir, a truck driver, a supplier of fruits and vegetables, a logistics specialist, and a resident of Lipetsk who rented out SIM cards. They were charged with committing a terrorist act and the illegal trafficking of weapons or explosives. None of the defendants admitted their guilt. They tried to convince the court that they had already passed a polygraph test and were open to cooperating with the investigation. But that did not help them. The explosion on the Crimean bridge itself occurred early in the morning on October 8, 2022. On the automobile section of the bridge, a truck loaded with explosives hidden in packages of polyethylene film blew up. This caused the collapse of 3 bridge spans. 5 people were killed. The operation was organized by the Security Service of Ukraine. The head of the agency, Vasyl Malyuk, later said that the people detained by Russian law enforcement were just ordinary propagandists, and the SBU had used them blindly. Loud explosions woke up the residents of Russia's Samara last night. Drones attacked the Novokuybishevsk oil refinery there, which, among other things, produces fuel for Russian aircraft. Local residents captured fireworks over the refinery on video. Several bright flashes lit up the sky. The final ones were directly over the plant. This region has been attacked before. In the summer, a petrochemical company located nearby was hit. They produced TNT and RDX there for bombs and missiles. And already in the afternoon, information appeared about drones in Grozny. There, the Akhmat Sever base was attacked. The video shows thick smoke rising above the complex, and one of the buildings is burning brightly. The attacked unit was created in 2022 by order of Ramzan Kadyrov and is actively involved in the Russian invasion of Ukraine. How do you perceive the news about explosions in Russia, and are you keeping count of the affected sites at this point? Share your thoughts in the comments to this broadcast on YouTube. And of course, don't forget to like and subscribe to the channel. Meanwhile, I will continue with the TSN broadcast. An apocalyptic fire in a Hong Kong residential complex. 65 people died in the flames and hundreds are considered missing. The fire broke out the day before. The fire engulfed as many as 7 high-rise residential buildings at once and quickly spread from floor to floor. A level 5, the highest danger rating, was declared. More than 700 people tried to contain the disaster, but unfortunately, tragedy could not be avoided. Thick, acrid smoke filled the complex and columns of flame shot high into the sky. In total, about 4,600 people lived in those buildings. They were evacuated and placed in temporary shelters. The exact cause of the fire is unknown. But why did the fire spread so quickly? There are some theories. The facades of these high-rise buildings, constructed in 1983, were undergoing repairs. They were covered on the outside with bamboo scaffolding, which is what actually caught fire. Currently, on suspicion of involuntary manslaughter, the Hong Kong authorities have detained 3 people who work for a construction company and have also promised to inspect the safety of other buildings where renovation work is ongoing. Punishment for the attack near the White House. The United States is suspending the processing of immigration applications from Afghan citizens for an indefinite period. This decision was made immediately after it became known that a 29-year-old Afghan national opened fire near the presidential residence in Washington and critically wounded 2 National Guardsmen. The suspect was detained. A relative of his said that he arrived in the United States in September 2021 after 10 years of service in the Afghan army, where he worked alongside American co-founders. Commenting on the incident, Donald Trump called the suspect an animal and described the attack as an act of terror. In addition, the head of the White House stated that it is necessary to vet people who arrived in the United States from Afghanistan during the tenure of his predecessor, Joe Biden, and also instructed Pentagon Chief Pete Hegseth to send an additional 500 National Guard troops to Washington to enhance security. France is reinstating voluntary military conscription. Emmanuel Macron announced the corresponding initiative. The main goal of this conscription is to modernize the armed forces and prepare young people for future risks. The program is set to launch next summer, and participation will be open to people aged 18 to 19. Anyone interested will be able to submit an application. From among them, the most motivated and those whose skills are needed by the army will be selected. Such conscripts will be provided with everything they need, including a financial allowance of 800 euros. The service will last for 10 months. The first month will be dedicated to general familiarization with army life and basic skills. After that, the young people will train in specific units and will receive a military specialty. If necessary, they may be involved in various missions within the country, such as standing guard or assisting the population alongside contract soldiers. The French president promised that the service would take place only within their own country and that they would not be sent abroad. And for now, they will not be returning to mandatory conscription. Let me remind you, it was abolished back in 1996.
In this world of uncertainty, where might prevails over law, war is a reality of today. Our nation cannot afford fear, panic, unpreparedness, or discord. And fear never prevents danger. The only way to avoid it is to be prepared for it. The national service will launch in the summer of 2026, and we will gradually increase the number of participants. 3,000 young people will be selected for the national service in the summer of 2026, and gradually these intakes will grow to 10,000 young people by the year 2030. My ambition for France is to reach 50,000 young people by the year 2035.